Hey, it's Rick, and today we're going to be painting this Pop Bobblehead Imperial Death Trooper from black to white. A friend of mine bought this. He was looking for a white stormtrooper in a bobblehead, but he couldn't find one of those, so he settled on this and asked me if I'd paint it white for him. I'm starting here by sanding the plastic. I don't really have anything made for this, and frankly nothing sticks to plastic really well. I'm going to be using an automotive etch primer because it's probably the best thing I've got for this. And then over top of that I'll be applying some acrylic paints with airbrushes, paintbrushes, and stippling, other techniques. There's nothing in the airbrush here. I'm just using the compressed air to blow the dust off from sanding. I'm using a piece of Frisket to mask off the decal that's on the front of this base. It says Star Wars. I don't want to get any paint on it or primer or sand it or anything. I'd rather just not touch that area. Here I'm just hitting the base with that etch primer I mentioned earlier. So this bobblehead has got a sort of a green decal where the goggles are, I guess to make them uniform and make them shiny. I've decided to mask that off just to protect it when I paint. It turns out it was totally unnecessary because in the end I painted the goggles anyway. Here I'm going to give the entire figure a sand. I think this is a 400 grit sandpaper. It's pretty fine. I've got this white paint that I'm going to be using for this. It is, I believe it's a Krylon paint for doing plastics and stuff. What I'm doing here, because I want to use it in the airbrush, so I've squirted a bunch of it into a paint tray and then poured that into my Aztec. This stuff is fairly thin, and it takes quite a lot of spraying to build up a sort of a white coat. It's still kind of a light gray, but it's good enough for this. I want the Stormtrooper to look like he's dirty anyway. You can see how the frisket applied over that Star Wars decal on the front is really protecting it from the paint and the primer. I've got a really watered down black acrylic paint in the airbrush here, and I'm spraying it on pretty heavy. I actually want it to go on too heavy and then sort of turn into a splatter that I can blow around with the airbrush. My plan is to make this look like a well-worn stormtrooper. He's supposed to look like he's been through the desert, he's been through war, he's got dirt on him, there's a lot of debris, there's a lot of crap in the cracks and crevices. So it's kind of like applying a wash, except instead of using a paintbrush to do it, I'm just using the airbrush. Here's the best part, the removing of that protective frisket. And now you can see it looks like a completed base. It takes a lot of coats of white paint to cover this, to make this lighter. Now that the initial coat's done, I figure I'd switch to a different camera angle so you can see me actually paint this thing. I started off here and my plan was to use the Pache Turbo to apply a very thin, small black details in the recessed areas. Again, kind of like a wash, but I was having troubles with the Turbo, so I ended up switching to a different airbrush. It's a very finicky machine, that thing. I'm just spraying in here around the recessed areas. I'm going to end up painting all these little vent holes black anyway, so what I'm trying to do now is just to, right around the border, create sort of a bleed. Almost looks like maybe there was smoke or dirt, maybe it's an intake vent or an exhaust vent or something. Next, I'm going to go in with a paintbrush and some thin black acrylic paint. This is a golden airbrush paint, so it's pretty opaque right out of the bottle. It doesn't have to be diluted down. It's ready to go. Here I'm going to paint all the vent holes around the helmet and all the parts of the body, the gun, everything that's supposed to be black. I'm using for reference a photo that I downloaded and printed off the internet. I'm not sure how accurate that is to the movie or what era that particular design's from, but it's good enough for this purpose. I've got a couple of different paint brushes here I'm using. This one is a rigging brush. Originally, rigging brushes back in the day were used for painting the rigging on paintings of tall ships. That's where they get their name. And because the end of the brush, the bristle part, is so long, it gives you stability. It actually will even out your shaky hand as you're painting. Same kind of thing if you look at pinstriping brushes that guys use to do automotive work. They tend to be very long. They hold a lot of paint, but they also even out, they steady out your stroke as you're painting with your hand. being a commercial illustrator, all the paints I've got are typically made for indoor use. They're not really an outdoor paint. There's no enamels, or I do have some for doing animation cells and sometimes models and things, but nothing really that's going to stick to this guy too well. So this is the kind of thing that'll have to be put on a shelf and just not touched. Now I'm going to add some red details. There's a couple of little spots here and there. I'd like to add some red paint, maybe to the gun, maybe to the back of his utility belt or backpack or something, just to give it a little bit of variation. Now I'm going to use some silver airbrush paint and just dry brush some edges on the rifle itself to make it look like the paint is worn away and it's a little bit used. So the Aztec airbrush has a stipple nozzle, which is what you're looking at here. It's a pink nozzle that screws in the end, and it actually outputs a stipple pattern on purpose, kind of like you've got a bent needle on your airbrush or really, really low air pressure, but it gives you a consistent kind of repeatability that I find works pretty good for stuff like this. So I'm just dirtying it up. Now here I'm scratching away the paint. This is how easy it is with an X-Acto knife to actually scratch the paint, the primer, and everything off right down to the black. It kind of worked out well that the original model was black plastic, because if you think about it, or at least for me, when I think about Stormtrooper outfit, I think about layers of plastic, probably white over black or something, and where it would be scratched or abraded, just like a car bumper, for example, with white paint on it. When you scratch that bumper, you reveal the black plastic underneath. I want this guy to look pretty beat up. What I'm doing now is mixing up a very transparent brown, and then I'm going to put that on a paintbrush and flick that onto the model to make him look like he's got some, some sand, some dirt, some mud, some other stuff. Essentially, this guy's been through the ringer. It's been a hard week at the office. He's been looking for some droids he just can't find. He's not having any luck. He's a little depressed, a little demoralized. He's covered in dirt. covered in scratches. He's maybe fallen off a speeder, crashed into a tree, you know. But he gets right back up, this guy. I mean, he is motivated. He's a dedicated employee, and he's going to do a good job. And here's the final. A little rotation so you can see him from all angles. Things turn out pretty good. I think he's got some dirt on him, he's got some mud, he's got some wear and tear. He doesn't look like a brand new, fresh off the assembly line stormtrooper. And I think that's going to work out well. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.